All right, get ready, because today we're diving into a question that'll really make you think. Do we actually need DNA for life to exist?
Yeah, it's a fascinating one.
I mean, we're taught it's like the blueprint, the instruction manual for everything.
Right.
But what if that's not the whole story?
Well, that's what's so interesting about this deep dive. The sources we're looking at today suggest that early life might not have needed DNA at all.
So we're going way back, like to the very beginning.
Yeah, we're talking about the origins of life on Earth.
Okay, so before DNA even existed, what was running the show back then?
Picture a world dominated by RNA.
RNA, okay.
It's a simpler molecule than DNA,
Hmm.
but it's surprisingly versatile. It can store genetic information like DNA, but it can also act as a catalyst for chemical reactions.
Oh, so it's like
That's-
a multi-tool.
Exactly.
Like a Swiss Army knife for early life forms.
You got it.
I like that. But how did these RNA organisms fuel themselves? Like, we need to eat all sorts of complex stuff to survive.
Well, you have to remember early Earth was a completely different environment.
Oh, right.
The atmosphere and the oceans were full of simple molecules, hydrogen, methane, ammonia.
Not exactly a gourmet meal.
No, not really. But it was enough for these early life forms. They were likely chemotrophs or autotrophs, meaning they could directly use these inorganic chemicals for energy or even sunlight in some cases.
Wow, talk about resourceful. But if these RNA organisms were doing okay, how did we end up in this DNA-dominated world? Like, was there some sort of evolutionary takeover?
It wasn't so much a hostile takeover,
Right.
more like a significant upgrade. DNA brought some major advantages to the table.
Such as?
Well, for one, it's much more stable than RNA and it's less prone to errors. So it makes it a far more reliable way to store and copy genetic information.
Okay, I see. So DNA wasn't necessary for life to get started,
Right.
but it was a game changer for evolving more complex life forms.
Mm.
So it's more like DNA wasn't the starting point, but it was like a level up later in the game.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
Okay, so if we're rethinking DNA's role as like the be-all and end-all, what's a better way to understand it? Like, is blueprint even the right word anymore?
The sources suggest thinking of DNA as a dynamic recorder of information rather than a rigid blueprint. One analogy they use is a music box.
A music box. Okay, I'm intrigued. How does that relate to DNA?
Well, think about it. A music box plays different tunes based on the arrangement of its pins, right?
Right.
Similarly, DNA's music, the traits and behaviors of an organism, are influenced by a whole orchestra of factors, including the environment.
Hold on. Are you saying that our genes aren't destiny? That our environment can actually change how our DNA is expressed?
That's exactly what the field of epigenetics is all about.
Epigenetics.
It looks at how external conditions, like what you eat, your stress levels, even social interactions, can impact which genes are turned on or off without altering the underlying DNA sequence. So yes, your environment plays a significant role.
So DNA is more like sheet music, and our environment is the conductor, shaping how the music is played. That's a powerful concept.
It is. It really is.
But before we go too far, I'm curious about those early organisms and their diet. How did what they were consuming contribute to the emergence of DNA?
Well, remember those simple molecules in the early Earth environment?
Right, hydrogen, methane.
Yeah, as they interacted and combined, they formed more complex compounds like proteins.
Okay.
And these proteins became the building blocks for more sophisticated life forms.
Yeah.
It's like the difference between having basic ingredients and a fully stocked pantry. You can create much more with the latter.
Right, you can make much more complex dishes. So the early organisms were essentially building up the pantry, leading to proteins, and eventually setting the stage for DNA.
You got it.
It's fascinating how everything is connected.
Yeah.
But is DNA just passively recording all of this? Like,
Yeah.
it's not really driving the bus, so to speak.
That's a crucial point. DNA isn't some all-powerful dictator calling the shots.
Okay.
It's part of an incredibly complex and dynamic system.
Right.
It's constantly interacting with other genes, proteins, and environmental cues.
So it's less about predetermined instructions.
Yeah, and more about storing and transmitting adaptive algorithms
Adaptive algorithms.
that are constantly evolving and responding to the world around us.
Adaptive algorithms. So it's
Yeah.
like DNA is a library of survival strategies, constantly being updated and revised based on what works best in a given environment.
That's a great way to put it.
That's a far more dynamic picture than just a static blueprint.
Yeah.
But I have to ask, how does this idea of DNA as a recorder of information relate back to those early RNA-based life forms? Like, was their information recorded differently?
That's a great question, and it leads us to an even more mind-boggling concept, the role of quantum mechanics in all of this.
Quantum mechanics. Okay, now we're going deep. What does quantum physics have to do with DNA and the origins of life?
Well, the sources point to a phenomenon called proton tunneling. It's a quantum effect that allows protons to essentially teleport through energy barriers, defying the classical laws of physics.
Wait, tiny particles are quantum tunneling inside our DNA, and that's somehow influencing our biology. This is definitely deep dive territory. But how does this proton tunneling actually work, and what kind of impact is it having?
That's what we'll be unpacking in the next part of our deep dive. Get ready to go subatomic because we're about to explore a whole new level of understanding about the intricate dance between the quantum world and the phenomenon of life. So we were talking about how DNA is more like a dynamic recorder of information than a static blueprint.
Right. A recorder, not a blueprint.
But what does that mean for those early RNA-based organisms? Did they record information differently?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was wondering.
Yeah.
Well, their information system must have been pretty different if they didn't even have DNA yet.
You're right. Their system was likely simpler, but still effective for their needs. Remember, RNA can act as both a carrier of genetic information and as a catalyst for chemical reactions.
Right, the Swiss Army knife.
Exactly. It was a jack-of-all-trades molecule, allowing those early life forms to function and evolve in a very different world than we see today.
Okay, that makes sense. But how does this connect to the whole quantum mechanics thing you mentioned earlier? I'm still trying to wrap my head around the idea of proton tunneling.
All right, let's dive into that. Imagine a tiny proton facing a wall of energy, a barrier it shouldn't be able to cross according to classical physics.
Okay.
But in the quantum world, things get a bit weird.
Weird how? Does the proton just magically teleport to the other side?
In a way, yes. It's called proton tunneling. Instead of going over the energy barrier, the proton can tunnel right through it. It's as if it disappears on one side and reappears on the other.
Okay.
And this isn't just some theoretical concept. It has real consequences for how DNA functions and possibly even how life itself evolved.
Okay, you've definitely piqued my curiosity. But how does this tunneling actually work? What's going on at that subatomic level?
It all comes down to the wave-like nature of particles in the quantum realm. Instead of thinking of a proton as just a tiny ball, picture it also having a wave associated with it. This wave can extend beyond the energy barrier, kind of like ripples spreading out in a pond.
So even if the proton itself doesn't have enough energy to go over the wall, its wave can reach the other side. Is that what allows it to tunnel through?
Exactly. It's like the proton's wave function is exploring all possibilities, including the unlikely one of passing through the barrier. And if the conditions are right, the proton can suddenly find itself on the other side, as if it teleported.
That's wild. But I still don't quite see how this connects to DNA. Are there protons tunneling all over our genetic code?
Here's the amazing part. Proton tunneling is thought to play a role in DNA mutations. Remember, DNA is made up of those base pairs, the building blocks of our genetic code. Well, proton tunneling can cause these base pairs to shift forms temporarily, potentially leading to mismatches when DNA replicates.
So if a proton happens to tunnel at just the right spot, it could cause a mutation. That's both fascinating and a bit unsettling. It adds a whole new layer of randomness to evolution.
It does. And while proton tunneling adds an element of chance to mutations, it's important to remember that these events are relatively rare, and DNA has sophisticated mechanisms to repair most errors.
So it's constant dance between chance and repair, with proton tunneling occasionally throwing a wrench into the works. But besides mutations, are there other ways proton tunneling is impacting us? Does it affect other biological processes?
Absolutely. Proton tunneling is essential for many enzymes to function properly.
Enzymes.
Enzymes are like tiny molecular machines that speed up biochemical reactions, and many of them rely on proton tunneling to do their job efficiently.
Wait, so this isn't just about random mutations. Proton tunneling is actually helping our bodies function at a fundamental level.
Precisely. It's involved in everything from energy production in our cells to the synthesis of crucial molecules. Proton tunneling is a fundamental process that's woven into the fabric of life itself.
Okay, this is blowing my mind. We started with a question about whether DNA is essential for life, and now we're talking about quantum particles teleporting inside our cells, affecting everything from mutations to how our enzymes work.
And we're not done yet. Remember that equation of life we discussed earlier, the one with variables like information dynamics and system efficiency?
Vaguely.
Well, proton tunneling has a direct impact on these variables, making it even more significant than we initially thought.
Okay, I'm all ears. How does proton tunneling fit into that equation?
Let's start with I, information dynamics. Proton tunneling directly influences this variable by affecting DNA mutations and enzyme activity. It subtly shapes the flow of information within our cells.
So proton tunneling is like a hidden language, a whisper of quantum mechanics influencing how information is stored, transmitted, and even changed within our bodies. That's incredible.
It is. But it doesn't stop there. Proton tunneling also impacts system efficiency by making biological processes faster and more efficient. Remember how we talked about it being involved in energy production in mitochondria? Well, by enabling the movement of protons across membranes, it helps convert nutrients into usable energy, making our cells run more smoothly.
So it's like proton tunneling is a tiny quantum mechanic, constantly fine-tuning our cellular machinery for optimal performance.
You could say that, yes?
But what about the A variable, adaptability? Does proton tunneling play a role there too?
You bet. It influences adaptability in two major ways. First, by contributing to DNA mutations, it introduces variations into the genetic code, leading to new traits and adaptations.
Yeah.
Second, some research suggests that proton tunneling might make organisms more sensitive to subtle environmental changes.
Wait, so proton tunneling could allow organisms to detect changes that are too subtle for us to even perceive. That's amazing.
It's a fascinating possibility that suggests quantum mechanics might play an even bigger role in evolution and adaptation than we previously realized. Imagine organisms being able to sense minute changes in their environment, all thanks to proton tunneling. It could open up a whole new world of possibilities for how life interacts with its surroundings.
So we've gone from the primordial soup to the quantum realm within our
It's
cells.
been quite a journey.
And it's clear that proton tunneling is having a huge impact on life as we know it. But how does this all tie back to the idea of DNA as a dynamic recorder of information?
Well, it really highlights how interwoven everything is. Proton tunneling isn't just some isolated phenomenon.
Right.
It's directly affecting how information is encoded, transmitted, and even changed within DNA. It's like this underlying quantum dance influencing the very essence of life.
So it's not just about the DNA molecule itself, but about the information it carries and how that information is constantly being shaped by these quantum events.
Exactly. It's like looking beyond the physical hardware and recognizing the importance of the software, the information that drives it all. And that's where this shift in perspective from DNA as a blueprint to DNA as a dynamic recorder becomes so powerful.
It's like we've been so focused on the physical structure of DNA, the double helix and those base pairs, that we've overlooked the dynamic processes happening within it.
And those dynamic processes are crucial for understanding how life truly works. They're what allow organisms to adapt, evolve, and thrive in ever-changing environments.
It's like the difference between looking at a static photograph and watching a movie. The photo gives you a snapshot, but the movie shows you the action, the drama, the unfolding story.
That's a great analogy. Life isn't a static picture. It's a dynamic process, a constant interplay of information, energy, and matter,
Right.
all influenced by factors we're only beginning to understand.
So we're moving away from a deterministic view of genes as destiny
Exactly.
and embracing a more fluid and interactive understanding of life.
It's exciting and a bit humbling at the same time.
It is, and it really underscores the importance of staying curious and open to new possibilities.
Yeah.
Who would have thought that exploring a question about whether DNA is essential for life would lead us to the quantum realm?
Right.
It's amazing how interconnected everything is, and this deep dive has shown us that there's still so much to discover about life, the universe, and everything in between.
Absolutely. We've only just scratched the surface. And as we continue to explore, we're bound to uncover even more mind-blowing connections and insights.
This has been an incredible journey. So what's the ultimate message we want our listeners to take away from this deep dive?
I think the key message is that life is far more dynamic, intricate, and interconnected than we often realize. It's a tapestry woven from threads of information, energy, and matter,
Yeah.
constantly interacting and evolving in ways we're only beginning to grasp.
And perhaps the most important takeaway is that our exploration of life, of the universe, of ourselves is just beginning. There are countless mysteries yet to be unraveled, countless connections yet to be made, and a whole universe of wonder waiting to be discovered.
Beautifully said. So keep asking questions, keep exploring, and never stop being amazed by the sheer brilliance and beauty of life in all its forms.
That's a perfect note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this incredible deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those minds wide open.